Welcome to this explainer. If you really look around you right now, modern civilization is basically built on an illusion of permanence. It's all sustained by this continuous, terrifyingly fragile flow of electrical energy. It's not just some utility bill you pay, it's the literal foundational substrate that our entire modern survival, water, food, healthcare, depends on.
Okay, so let's put you right in the middle of a massive, long-duration power outage to see exactly how fast this unravels. You see, the United States operates as a massive just-in-time machine. It's incredibly efficient, supplies arrive exactly when they're needed, but that means we have essentially zero deep buffers built into the system. So what happens when that machine just stops? Civilization unravels, and it happens unbelievably fast.
Experts actually have a term for this. They call it a de-complexification event. Now, I know that sounds super clinical, but what it really means is a complete systemic collapse. It rapidly strips away all the technology, that artificial carrying capacity that allows hundreds of millions of us to survive in these dense urban areas. To put the fallout into perspective, expert analyses from the EMP Commission have concluded that up to 90% of the population could perish if this carrying capacity drops out. I mean, that's not sensationalism. That's a literal data-backed conclusion.
And when emergency planners try to figure out who gets hit the hardest, they aren't just looking at the power lines. They look at these critical variables: your local demographic structure, the technical infrastructure, and even the specific season. These are the exact factors that dictate just how catastrophic a blackout is going to be for your specific neighborhood.
Let's break down the timeline, starting with the first 72 hours. This period is usually defined by a lot of false hope. People naturally assume the lights are just going to come back on. But actually, this marks the absolute end of normalcy. It kicks off with a massive information vacuum known as the Great Silence. By hour 4, cell networks are completely congested. By hour 8, the backup batteries on those cell towers are totally dead.
Just look at these ticking clocks. Our interconnected society has basically outsourced its survival to backup systems that are measured in mere hours, not weeks. As you can see, the digital world is the very first thing to vanish. Cellular towers, they're the first domino to fall.
So imagine this scenario. You wake up a few hours after the power goes out. It's still off. You grab your fully charged phone to check the news, and all you see is, all circuits are busy. It's incredibly eerie. The physical device in your hand works perfectly fine, but the network it needs to talk to the world? It's completely dead.
And guys, this isn't just a minor inconvenience. It triggers a profound psychological shock. We have totally outsourced our situational awareness to these little screens. So instead of doom scrolling, you're hit with extreme anxiety and disorientation. Without communication, communities are instantly isolated. That absolute void of data is almost immediately filled by rumor and fear, completely severing the social trust you'd absolutely need to coordinate any kind of recovery.
But it gets worse. Moving into hour 8 to 24, as the digital world stays dark, the crisis becomes intensely, physically dangerous for millions of urban residents. We enter this deadly scenario known as the vertical trap. Think about it. A modern city is essentially a giant hydraulic machine that uses electricity to defy gravity. Without power, there is zero grace period. Residents face an immediate hydraulic shock. Literally, the moment those electric booster pumps fail at the bottom of a high-rise, the water pressure on the upper floors drops to absolute zero. Instantly.
And that triggers a truly grim chain reaction of sanitation failure. Our sewage systems completely rely on electric lift stations to fight gravity. When those lose power, the wastewater just stops. Raw sewage actually begins backing up directly into streets and basements, turning fully functional homes into literal biohazards in a matter of hours. And hey, you might be thinking, what about the bucket flush method? Well, try hauling heavy gallons of water up 30 flights of stairs in pitch black if you're elderly or infirm. It's a physical impossibility. This creates a really stark contrast. Rural communities can generally maintain at least a basic degree of energy and food self-sufficiency, right? They can adapt. But urban high-rises? They quickly turn into vertical prisons. The exact same density that makes the city incredibly efficient on a normal Tuesday makes it catastrophically fragile during a major blackout.
Compounding all of this danger, building sprinkler systems are rendered completely useless without that water pressure. So what happens? Desperate, freezing residents start lighting candles. The risk of fire skyrockets. And without water pressure or even working radios to call the fire department, a high-rise blaze in these conditions becomes an absolute, unstoppable death sentence.
As we move into the second and third days, the nature of the crisis shifts. It goes from a systemic, infrastructure failure to a direct biological one,
as our life-saving systems start to falter. We enter healthcare's ticking clock.
Now, this number right here on the screen, 72, is absolutely terrifying. That is the federally mandated fuel limit for hospital emergency generators. And that limit just assumes that normal supply chains are going to swoop in and replenish them. But without electricity to pump fuel from underground depot tanks or even to run traffic lights, those resupply trucks simply aren't coming.
Inside the hospitals, it's a nightmare scenario. As fuel eventually runs out and mechanical stress literally breaks these generators from running nonstop, the modern medical golden hour completely evaporates. Doctors are forced to make incredibly grim triage decisions as life support and ventilators just shut down. And without diagnostic equipment, no CT scanners, no MRIs, no blood labs, modern medicine essentially ceases to exist. We're talking a forced return to 19th century medicine overnight.
And here's another massive hidden vulnerability that people rarely think about: the pharmaceutical cold chain. This is the strictly temperature-controlled supply chain that's vital for keeping medications biologically active. Honestly, it's a system the industry struggles to maintain on a perfectly normal day, let alone during a total grid collapse. The breakdown of this cold chain creates something called the insulin cliff. For millions of insulin-dependent individuals, losing refrigeration starts a deadly biological clock that just cannot be stopped. Their life-saving medications rapidly degrade. And if you're thinking the government will step in, well, the strategic national stockpile relies on that exact same failing refrigerated logistics system. There's no backup coming. By the time we cross that 72-hour mark and head toward week 3, whatever tiny buffer of stored resources we had is just gone. The industrial crash has fully set in. We transition entirely into the biological crash phase, and the timeline gets incredibly dark. Without massive logistical support from the outside world to bring in fuel, even our most highly secure facilities face disaster. Take nuclear plants, for example. A station blackout happens when a plant loses off-site power and has to rely strictly on emergency diesel generators to cool the reactors. The terrifying part, those generators typically only hold about 7 days of fuel. And this right here reveals the ultimate paradox of our modern infrastructure. It is nearly impossible to restore the electrical grid without the grid itself already running. Think about the closed loop. Grid loss takes down the SCADA computer networks. Without computers, fuel transport halts completely. Because transport is halted, power plants can't get fuel, and without fuel, they can't generate the power needed to reboot those computers. It's an inescapable trap. So when the entire system freezes and all digital ties are cut, who's going to save you? Ultimately, your survival in a post-grid world depends entirely on what experts call the speed of trust. It comes down to the robustness of your local mutual aid. Your neighbors, the human element, become your absolute best chance at navigating the crisis. The data makes it brutally, undeniably clear. A de-complexification event is exactly what it sounds like. It is the sudden, violent, forced reversion of a 21st century population back to a pre-industrial biological reality. That artificial carrying capacity that flawlessly sustains hundreds of millions of people, it's just stripped away in a matter of days. Which leaves us with one incredibly provocative question. Are we willing to prioritize an architecture of true, fundamental resilience over the sheer efficiency of our current system before the machine stops forever? Something to seriously think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the systems around you.